So my name is Cynthia O'Brien. I'm in beautiful Portland, Oregon, and I will be your chair this evening. For those who are new, and a refresher for the rest of us, what is a Braver Angels debate? It's not a candidates debate. It's not a competition. So the main difference between our debate style and others is really the spirit of it. We consider this a collective search for truth. We're not trying to win. There are no teams. What we're trying to do is share what we really do think and get closer to the truth. And these are hard questions. This is what we're known for. We only debate hard questions, and we're here to wrestle with them. So the number one rule on our floor is to say what you believe. So we're here to debate the truth of this statement. Resolved, the American system of government cannot function without its citizens subscribing to a shared sense of reality. All right, with that, I call this debate to order. Right. And I'm looking for a speech in the affirmative. So from the registration, we invited Marla to speak in the affirmative, then Bruce in the negative, then Bill in the affirmative, and Aaron in the negative. And we had a conversation with all of them last day or two. Marla, are you ready to speak? You will unmute yourself.
Hi, a warm hello to my fellow Braver Angels. My name is Marla Silverman. I am a blue and registered Democrat. I am a firm believer that in order for a government to function, it is important our people subscribe to a shared sense of reality. I have been supporting Braver Angels since its inception in 2016. I became a moderator in 2019. Before I became a Democrat, I was an independent NPA voter in Florida. I can attest I voted for Republicans in the past. I no longer do that. Consider myself a jack of all trades and a master of none. Basically because I have a very diversified professional employment background. So anyway, so getting to the bottom of the resolution, I believe what we are lacking now in our country is seriousness in government. Tom Nichols recently on an Atlantic magazine essay described seriousness as a virtue that has been taken away from us. He further described as the burden of knowing that we own our decisions, that our actions have consequences. It is the sense of responsibility that helps us to act without being ordered to act. The instinct that tells us, even when we are alone, that we owe a duty to others and that our behavior affects them as much as it does ourselves. When we talk about shared reality, I can basically point out to basic stuff. We all know that we don't place our hands on a hot stove. We know the consequences. That is a physical painful reality. It is data, knowledge learned. We know the sun rises every day and that night at the time is a time for us to sleep and rejuvenate. These human natural cycles, actions provide us common sense, health, and supply our physiological needs. It is also data acquired that is shared from generation to generation. Rituals create knowledge. But seriously, pun intended, how do we translate this to a healthy government functionality? It has to include how serious our politicians are in the process of governing, how they take this responsibility at heart to create shared knowledge that trickles down to their constituencies and communities. If they don't do that, we won't have a stable democracy. Stability is the foundation of a democracy. Data is critical. Sometimes it can contradict our own beliefs. A good example is the 2020 presidential elections. Data clearly shows the results did not favor our former president, yet he persists in stating he won the elections. And many of our politicians have lost the virtue of seriousness by indulging his whims. They know he lost. They have the data at hand, yet they disregard it because they think it is a political expediency. From the data of many citizens' observations of the situation, we don't think they deserve to be leaders. We know they're not looking for the interests of the citizens they represent. much less for the country. When one makes a decision on how to buy a home, move to a new city, or start a new job, they use not only internal personal data, but also other variables such better schools for my children, better business opportunities for a spouse, weather, and social mobility.
20 seconds.
All are taken in decision-making process. A country cannot go on without taking consideration to acquire knowledge that are often related to other virtues. Prosperity for all, equality, equity, social mobility, affordable access to healthcare, and policies that support the vitality of our democracy.
All right. Thank you very much. And let's have some jazz hands for our speaker. This is a way to show support and affirmation. So good job there. All right. Now I will take a question for the speaker. And when you ask your question, just make it brief and concise and address it to me, Madam Chair. I'm looking in my participant window, closing my chat, which now seems to be working somewhat. It's gremlins or something, I don't know. And I'm looking for an electronic hand that says that you'd like to ask a question. So at the bottom of your participant window, you should see a raise hand function. If you click that, that will make your blue hand appear. So. All right.
Could I mention that in the new version, it's not in that room, it's on the under the reactions icon.
Oh, thank you very much, Bill.
Sure.
Yeah, I see there is reactions, but anyway, not seeing anyone with the question. I'll give it just a minute. I do see. All right, here we go. Thank you. Thank you. All right, John Dykers, do you have a question? And please address it to me, Madam Chair.
Unmuted.
There we go.
Madam Chair,
Good
I
job.
wonder if Cynthia would address her comment about ritual and reality, that repetition fools our brains into believing that's the truth.
Okay, could you speak to that? You have 1 minute to answer. Marla, you need to be unmuted. There you go, 1 minute.
Okay, so the question is if rituals, if they become repetitions, then they become reality. Well, not necessarily, because without the knowledge that you acquire through a ritual, I don't think that would be the issue. However, if somebody keeps telling you, for example, that if you are no good, that you are not going to succeed, that the country is failing, that we are filled with that our politicians are crooked, you know, so those things become almost like self-fulfilling prophecies. But that doesn't mean that's necessarily part of a ritual. I think it's part more of a behavior that people have a tendency to display.
All right, thank you. And let's see, Leo Gilmore, do you have a question? You can unmute and ask.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to know people's opinion about how they help people have patience to validate their thinking, to actually listen and try to understand others' views of reality.
Okay, Marla, 1 minute.
Well, in my case, I have some besties who are really staunch Republicans, and we have had some really amazing conversations. And sometimes we get emotional about certain things, and sometimes we just agree to disagree. And sometimes, you know, we agree that there are so many things that are common to us as human beings, they're coming to us as citizens, they're coming to us as neighbors, that, and a good example would be, for example, I am surrounded by reds where I live, but comes hurricane time, everybody is is one. Everybody's a good neighbor. Everybody comes and help me. I help others. You know, we cook our meals that they are falling apart from the refrigerator that broke outdoors. You know, so we really gather together, and it doesn't matter whether we're red or blue. So yeah, I think that there are ways that we can find a commonality, and there's a certain way that we can express opinions, and not necessarily having to agree, but understand what the other's coming from.
Thank you very much. I do see a couple questions, but we're going to just do 1 or 2 questions for each speaker. So with that, the speaker is thanked. All right, good job, everybody. Yes, team, I seem to be back on chat for the debate staff team, and we'll just hope for the best, right? All right, so now we have a speech in the negative, and I am looking for Bruce. Can you
I am here.
Great. All right, you have 4 minutes, Bruce.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Bruce Schwartow, and for the last 30 years, I've worked with government officials at the city, the township, and the county levels throughout southern Minnesota. When I look at these officials, I mean, some of them are friends of mine. I've known them for many years, but they're residents who step forward to provide leadership on how tax money is spent to provide the greatest benefit to their neighbors. My role has been to help them as they try to reach their economic or community development goals. Sometimes it's as a researcher, and sometimes I'm working as a coach with a community. I've watched them as they handle issues such as, okay, a city council trying to decide, are we going to require the developer to put in sidewalks, knowing that that will raise the price of housing when we're really trying to develop more affordable housing. The townships may be looking at, or the county may be looking at, do we want to resurface the road this year, or do we need to rebuild it completely? Remember, these men and women go to sports events and church with the farmers that are now going to need to pay maybe another $10, $20, $30 an acre, depending on what's decided at that decision. For many communities, one of the big topics that we see is, should we grant a variance on the number of dairy cows that can be raised on the Jones farm? That discussion will really raise some voices. I was asked by a township board a few years ago to facilitate a discussion about the perceived and actual environmental damage that might occur. It took a citizen panel 6 months, but unfortunately, when the board voted on a moratorium the day before we presented the report to them. People see facts through their own lens. It's not just based on secondary data, but on the personal experience and the collection of stories that they've heard from their families. They cherry pick oftentimes data that supports the reality that they see out there, and they want others to see the same thing. And this sample of small governments that I've worked with also starts to carry into higher levels of government. Most of the time, people are not out to be deceptive, but making a simple choice on deciding whether to use a data set based on per capita as compared to per household can really provide 2 different views of a reality of a situation. To me, when I hear the phrase, a shared sense of reality, it means that we agree on the situation that exists. But good decision making requires that we hear alternative voices of the public. If everyone agrees on something, it usually means we haven't invited enough voices to the meeting. People need to hear different realities. How will the choices that we make affect the people who are different than us? Don't expect that people are going to abandon their preconceived views. If we waited for everyone to agree on a reality, we would never reach the end. We are better off if we can negotiate compromises that improve the situation for many different realities. Government needs to function even without a shared sense of reality, but hopefully we can agree on a long-term destination. Implementation never goes as expected. There will be times when the short-term implementation doesn't create equitable situations, but we can handle those as they come. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. With 16 seconds to spare. Good job. All right. I'll now take one or two questions for the speaker. So I'm looking in my participant window for a question. And basically the way I take questions is I'm going to take the first ones I see, they'll come in order. But if you've already spoken or already asked a question, I might skip over you to get to somebody we haven't heard from yet. So just to let you know, that's the procedure. So I see Jerry Nelson. Would you unmute and ask your question, Jerry?
Madam Speaker, I wonder if Bruce would define, or maybe, when I think of reality, I think of a narrow definition and a broad definition. And I wonder if he would agree to that, that we have maybe, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is a broad, but a narrow view of reality. Does he see that there could be a difference there?
Okay, thank you. 1 minute to answer, Bruce.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would agree that there can be multiple definitions of reality that would be coming in here. I looked at it as I say, a sense of what is currently the situation, and maybe even why did it occur? What was the reason that we're in this current situation? And so I think that's how I looked at it when I answered this question.
All right, thank you. Another question, I'm going to call on Noel Clemens. Noel, you can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Madam Chair, my question is sort of similar to the gentleman before me. I feel like what maybe Bruce is talking about, different perspectives, different cultures, maybe like urban versus rural or urban versus suburban. But I think that what my perspective of what different realities is when we are subscribing to different news sources, and when we don't agree anymore on who wins an election, or
okay, can you make that into a question?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. My question for Bruce is if he could just address the difference between what I'm seeing as culture and perspective versus what are like a shared reality for Americans in general is.
Thank you. Bruce, 1 minute to answer.
Yeah, an excellent question. I will say for myself that I use probably a general news source, mainstream media, for many years. And I did get into the habit because I was looking at some of the data that was showing up, and I couldn't exactly agree with how it was being interpreted. And so I would turn on Fox News just to see how did they answer the same thing. I am now at the point where I kind of avoid many of the news sources, because looking at them, I do see biases, and I try to watch everything, but try to make my own decision.
Thank you. All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. I know there are more questions, I know, but we're gonna keep moving, just keep it moving. So our next affirmative speaker is Bill Howe. Bill, are you ready to speak?
I'm ready, if you can hear me.
We certainly can, 4 minutes.
Okay. I believe that citizens need a shared sense of reality in order for a government like ours to function properly. But I wonder, how can this exist when half of us see an elephant with a short rope-like thing hanging from the end, and half of us see an elephant with a huge hose-like thing hanging from the end? Most people in our nation believe in science, but too often we believe as if the scientific method does not apply to human affairs. For science to flourish, we need honest scientists, an environment that allows them to freely share the results, and a general sense of humility whereby hypotheses can be changed if warranted. Well, in 2020, I volunteered for the Tulsi Gabbard campaign, but I ended up voting for Trump as I did in 2016. Now, at a recent Braver Angels Alliance, I explained why I voted for Trump, And one of the blue participants said that this is the first time she had ever heard a Trump voter explain why they voted for him. Most of us, I'm sure, have witnessed something of this type, people living in separate information bubbles. It feels safe, and popping the bubble seems dangerous, I know, because I've been there. So some people wonder who is to blame for these bubbles. The media that might slant the news to please their tribe, or social media where people might be canceled for unpopular beliefs. Maybe the government that might go after whistleblowers like Edward Snowden or Julian Assange, or maybe the citizens for listening to propaganda instead of each other. Or could the blame be assigned maybe to the enemies of truth who want to create a totalitarian world? Could it be that these enemies laugh as we allow ourselves to be divided by fear and by propaganda, some to the right side of the elephant and some to the left side? But we as people need to get beyond blame. We need to rededicate ourselves to the science of building a more perfect union. It's time to pop the bubble, to dedicate ourselves to reaching out, to speaking out, and to listening. Do I know what information people have that make them believe the election was stolen? What gives me hope is organizations like Braver Angels that attempt to show that our unity as a nation does not rely on agreement of facts, but in a shared sense of reality, a belief in the science of truth.
Okay, is there a question for the speaker? All right. So.
This is the hard part, the questions.
Yeah, this is the good part. All right. Let's see. Eloise, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I would like to ask Bill if he wouldn't mind repeating, because I didn't hear it in the previous event, why he voted for Trump, and in particular, how that relates to his sense of reality. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute to answer.
Okay. Voting for Trump, I will say, was a hard decision for me. I don't really identify as a Democrat or Republican. For example, I was a Republican to support Ron Paul. I was a Democrat to support Tulsi Gabbard. I found, I think I didn't totally decide to vote for Trump until maybe a couple weeks before. I tend to maybe lean conservative because of certain beliefs I have, and the importance of keeping the foundations of our nation is important. And I think overuse of immigration and illegal immigration, it does not a nation build. And I have, I would think, I was partly influenced by just a feeling of this keeping people in the bubble was done by people on the extremes. I would see more extreme, I thought, on people on the left wing of things. So various things like that probably finally pulled me into voting for Trump.
Thank you. Another question. I see Tom. You can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so very much. Madam Chair, we've talked about a lot of times I've heard reality versus facts in all three of these. And sometimes I think they're being used interchangeably. But I think that the current speaker had a very good point, or the previous speaker, I'm sorry, made a good point that we may not always come to the same reality. But we do need to come, I think everyone's agreed, to the same facts. And
so can you make that into a question?
Thank you. So when an elephant is in a room, it's not a hose or a rope, it's a trunk. How do we figure out as a society, how do we evaluate what the facts are and what the truth is, and how do we define, or who do we have defining that truth?
Okay, yeah. My intention with emphasizing the science of this thing is that, for example, if the way we use in our discourse a lot of times was used by scientists over the centuries, we would probably still be bleeding people to find to cure them of a disease. But the fact that we allow, traditionally in science, we allow for people to disagree, and we have, you know, for example, we don't have news sources saying, oh, this guy found that bleeding doesn't work. We're going to cancel him. We're not going to let him, you know, be on YouTube or whatever. So I think if we all believe that our thing we need to agree on is that, you know, no, we don't need only Fox News. We don't need only MSNBC, but we need citizens to demand that everyone is, you know, not shouting for their tribe, especially in the news business, that we are all sincerely trying to find out, okay, now what is the reason that people think the election was stolen? Now, what is the reason people are so concerned about congressmen not certifying the vote? And you know, I'm always feeling like I can follow news to a certain extent, and then the obvious questions disappear because no one wants to talk about it because we're in this tribal situation. So I think if we dedicate ourselves to to scientific method in terms of our human relations and our news sources, you know, we'll do a lot better, you know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, the speaker is thanked. We're moving to our next speech in the negative, and I'm looking for Aaron Wolf. Aaron, are you with us?
I am, thanks.
Great, you have 4 minutes.
Awesome. So thanks so much. I find myself in quite a lot of agreement with those who've come before me, and I appreciate that. I come to this as a professional mediator. I work on shared water conflicts, which means I'll be in a room with ranchers and environmentalists and a bunch of people who have vastly different worldviews, or internationally, Arabs and Israelis, Indians and Pakistanis. I'm trained as a scientist, and so I believe fervently in measurement. I believe absolutely in the scientific method, and I am about as blue as one gets, and I'm a combat vet and serious advocate of the Second Amendment. So this is walking into this question. How do we function? Can we function? And I think from my experience and from our shared experience, the answer has to be yes. One, we have to recognize that we all believe our own facts. We all believe our own experts. And none of us know from firsthand experience what happened in the election. We pick and choose who we're going to believe and advocate on behalf of those positions. There's a truism in the sciences that the single most political act one can make is to take a measurement. All science is political, all measurement is political. And my friends on the left are really fervent about the science behind masks and about science behind climate change, but ignore the science that GMOs aren't harmful to the body, or the relation between gun violence and gun control. So we pick and choose regardless. So we're deeply, also, we have a rich history of being deeply committed to different realities through our commitment to religious freedom. Those of us who are religious, and I am, have one view of how the world works, our relationship to each other, relationship to the divine. Other people have profoundly different views of reality, and we've committed as a nation to live with those contradictions. How do we do it? One, we start with shared values. So people on the climate change side, is climate change human caused or not? Doesn't matter. Let's fix Houston. Let's get Miami out of the water. Let's fix the things that we can fix and recognize that we have actions that we can commit to. If we focus on values, on the gun debate is about safety. Both sides believe fervently about safety. So the question becomes, how do we become safer as a society? while protecting our legitimate constitutional rights. And finally, I think the last thing, and this is what we're doing here, is we have to recognize that there is a profound satisfaction in learning to live together. I see this all the time in mediations, that somebody says something nice, somebody compliments somebody else, somebody listens to somebody else, and it's both contagious and addictive. And I think that's what we're doing here in Braver Angels, is becoming addicted to the pure, deep, passionate joy of connecting with people with whom we don't agree.
Thank you. I'm looking for a question for the speaker, and I see a hand raised. Don Martens, you can unmute and ask your question to me.
Madam Chair, I'm interested in knowing if the speaker, when he talks about shared sense of reality, how does Mother Nature fit into a shared sense of reality? I mean, I don't think Mother Nature has a sense of reality. There's just the reality, and what Mother Nature does is going to definitely affect society. So,
Okay.
how does he feel about
Aaron, you have
shared
1 minute
sense
to
of
answer.
reality?
I like Mother Nature. that's my response. No, there's no question that there is a real world out there, but all of us experience the real world through our own preconceptions, through our own lenses, through our own biases, as other people have said. The question is, how do we learn to live together while seeing the world through our own respective lenses?
All right. Thank you. Another question for the speaker, Bobby Ratliff. You can unmute and ask your question.
Madam Chair, I was wondering if Aaron could expand upon his statement that measurement is political.
Okay, Aaron, 1 minute.
Yeah, so I spend my time around people who have virulent disagreements about science, the water sciences, and they bring their experts, they bring their biases. When you take a measurement, you have a preconception about what you're looking for, how you're going to measure, what method you're going to use. And most of the time, those of us in the sciences have an idea where we want to get. And if you look at all the ugly things that we've done with science historically, the things that we've tried to prove through the scientific method, we have to recognize that the scientific method is a human method and therefore susceptible to all of the biases, preconceptions, and politics that we ourselves are susceptible to.
All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. All right, that concludes the first round of 4-minute speeches. We're going to move to 3-minute speeches now. And I've been communicating with the whips through the magic of technology, and they have let me know that some people have asked to speak. So just to give you all a heads up, the next 5 speakers will be Ethan, Matthew, Keith, Amy, and Neil. So that gives you a sense of where we are, and we'll continue to take questions as well. So Ethan Abelman, you're up for a 3-minute speech, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay, hello, I'm Ethan, thank you. I'm new here, so this is cool. I would generally support the resolution, but I think there's sort of another factor that might be missing from the discussion so far, which is the idea of trust and what a lack of trust in others does to our government. So for example, I believe that the coronavirus is real and that masking helps, but I obviously am not an epidemiologist. Well, not obviously, but I'm not. I haven't looked into a microscope. For all I know, this is fiction made up by someone. But I must trust, because our society is built around trusting the institutions and trusting other people who are experts in what you are not, right? I trust that if I pay my bills, my lights will stay on, and that if that contract is not honored, I trust that I can pressure an elected official or a court to make it so. And if my elected official fails to do that, I trust that I can then oust them electorally by, and that I trust that they will then respect that result. So our entire system functions because we trust that people will do what they're supposed to do. So given that society breaks down without trusting each other, and given we certainly would trust most people that our lights will stay on, but if we don't trust the same set of facts about, say, the coronavirus, how can we conclude anything besides the fact that society will eventually break down as we continue to trust different groups and different mediums? Not like 100% confident in that argument, but that's kind of how I'm thinking about this conversation.
All right, thank you. I'm looking for a question for the speaker. Beth, you can unmute and ask your question.
Okay, Ethan, thank you. I agree with you.
And you want to
about,
address that to me?
trusting.
Yeah, to Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Speaker.
Yeah, no problem.
Madam Chair, I agree with Ethan about the lack of trust. And my question would be, how do you see a possibility where reds and blues sharing data? Like, what data could we share that we can trust?
Okay, Ethan, 1 minute.
That's a really good question, and I don't think I have the answer to that. I will observe that, and I'm pretty young, so maybe I don't have the perspective that at least from quick looking, most folks on this call do. But I sense that this is a trend that we over time we have become less and less trustful, not just of each other, but of institutions. We are more likely to be skeptical that what the government or what media is telling us is true, in part because of the internet and other developments. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be skeptical of what authorities say. We should, but yeah, I don't know the answer. But it's a worrying trend that makes me worry about the future of our democracy.
Thank you. Another question, Patty Morrissey, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Ethan, Madam Chair, sorry. I think Ethan's points are extremely important to this idea of a shared sense of reality from the perspective that we are going to come at different issues, as the previous speakers have said, from how we're perceiving it through our lens. But when it comes to issues of national importance, and I work
into a question.
Yep. In the national security field, we as citizens have our trust is essential to the functioning of the government to protect us. My question is, I know you said you're young. I mostly just think what you said is extremely important and spot on, as young as you are.
Yes. What's your question?
And I guess I would like to know a little bit more about how you came to those observations, those critical observations that you just made.
How he came to those observations. All right. Ethan, 1 minute to answer.
So I'm a blue, pretty radical leftist type person. And I mean, yeah, I say I'm young, but like I get the sense based on the adults around me that this is still a pretty unusual time. And even just like the fact that people don't agree that the election was won by Joe Biden is mind-boggling to me. Like, it does not compute. But at the same time, I recognize that many people do not trust the media. And it forced me to confront myself, like, okay, why do I trust the media? I have to trust someone. So I mean, I'm not counting the votes. And I can't just believe whatever I see on the internet. So I guess that's sort of the logical conclusion, right? That there's just separate people are trusting different things, and given that in the past, most people seem to accept results of elections, that seems like a new thing to me. But yeah,
Okay.
and that's just my perspective.
All right. And with that, the speaker is thanked. All right. So we are moving to a speech in the negative. Matthew Hausman, would you like to speak? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, although I was actually speaking in the affirmative. Is that okay to go ahead?
I'm going to take a speech in the negative, so we go back and forward. So just hold on, Matthew. I'm going to just rework my list here. Thank you for that. Amy Purdy, are you ready? You were interested in speaking in the negative. You have 3 minutes.
So, hi, my name is Amy, and I have not prepared a talk, but when I first read this a few weeks ago, my immediate reaction was, yes, the American system of government can function without its citizens subscribing to a shared sense of reality. And my first reaction to this statement was that, as many other people have said, everyone probably operates in a slightly different sense of reality than each other person. Like, I see something, then I say it's blue, you say it's blue, but I don't know that you're seeing the exact same color as I am, or the same thing as I am, but we agree to call it blue. So that's kind of was my first reaction. So really, we don't really know, and probably everyone has a slightly different sense. But what I think is that reality itself, or the idea of reality, is itself a separate force than our belief about it. And I believe that right now we're at crisis points. The force of reality is going to become strong enough that our senses of it are going to lose or not become prominent. So for example, I can say I don't believe there's a tree outside, but when I run headlong into it, I'm going to get knocked out. So that's fine that I believe it's not there, but the reality of the physical reality, had something to say about my belief. So, I mean, that's kind of what my reaction was to that. And the reason I say, yeah, our government has been functioning. Our liberal democracy has been functioning up to this point with the idea, with my understanding that everyone has a slightly different sense of share of reality. So yes, that to me it's existing. I think now maybe we're at that point where we're maybe hitting into the tree. I mean, someone had mentioned something about climate change. So yeah, we don't have to believe it, but when the water is coming up, into our houses, like something has, still have to do something. You have to make a choice. So you can believe it's not there, but you're going to drown if you don't do something. So that's my first reaction to the statement.
Thank you very much. All right, question for the speaker. Ashley Craig, you can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Hi, Madam Chair. My question for the speaker is, does she think that the challenges that we're having now in our democracy, so probably 50 million or so people not thinking that the election was legitimately won by Joe Biden, does she think that's attributable to these different views of reality?
All right, 1 minute to answer, Amy.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that, again, what a lot of people have said, the factors that go into creating or that you pull in to create your own sense of reality, and they're so complex. I mean, your psychological background, your experience, the things you read, the people that you talk to, and what you trust. I mean, I agree with all those things. And yes, I think that's exactly what's happening. I mean, I just want to say that I don't know that our society is going to survive. I mean, I really think we're at that point where, reality is going to hit and maybe we'll be destroyed. I mean, that's what I think.
All right, thank you. Another question? Charles Mecenas, did I pronounce it right? Yeah.
Macinus, yes.
Yeah, go ahead and ask your question to the chair.
Okay. Daniel Moynihan said that everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but not to their own facts. So when saying that, are you equating reality with facts? Are you disagreeing with Daniel? Are you disagreeing with Daniel Moynihan? And I apologize for my voice. I had a tooth pulled today, so I'm
all right, Amy.
I'm all muffled here.
Came through just fine. Thank you. 1 minute to answer, Amy.
I mean, that's a really interesting question because I always thought I agreed with Daniel Moynihan, but I think maybe I have to say that I disagree because a fact is, it depends on what we mean by a fact. So if I were to say that my running into the tree is a fact, it's there, it's going to knock me out, then that's a fact. But other facts have so many elements that go into them that we can disagree on the facts. So I mean, yeah, I guess that the basic facts of water coming up and you being almost drowning. I mean, there are certain existential facts, I guess. So again, it depends on what you mean by facts, what he meant by facts. Maybe I have a narrower view of facts.
All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. Our next speaker in the affirmative is Matthew Hausman. Matthew, you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, my name is Matt. I am a lifelong Republican, speaking in the affirmative because my background is from the STEM field. So an objective reality is something very important from my perspective. Speaking of perspective, I appreciate that viewpoint that some of the speakers have said about perspectives, but I think perspectives are different from facts and reality. And I almost thought I was going to be the first one to mention the Moynihan quote until Charles snuck it in right before me. But I spent 10 years in the space industry. And if we were having a debate about whether to spend more or less in the space industry, there's legitimate sides on both sides of that argument. But if somebody was going to say that the Earth is actually flat, we're not having a legitimate debate anymore because that is an objective reality that the Earth is a globe. And despite however many people are on Facebook groups that say flat Earth. So I'm moving that to a more, obviously people have talked about the election, there's global warming and things like that, but kind of splitting the difference between the really polarizing conversations and the flat Earth conversation. If we were talking about civil rights issues and debating on that, Aaron, I believe, mentioned past science that's been bad, would we let people start to bring in eugenics into a civil rights debate? And I think we can all objectively dismiss the concept of eugenics, and it muddies the debate. And this objective reality is actually foundational in other parts of our society besides politics. We have laws about truth in advertising, about contracts and fraud, about perjury. You can't use as a defense in truth in advertising that, well, this is my truth. Or if you're being charged with perjury, you can't say, well, in my mind, I was telling the truth. Those aren't legitimate defenses. And so that's why I think objective reality is paramount for us to continue as a society.
All right, thank you. Question for the speaker. Bob Stump, you can unmute and ask your question.
Madam Chairman, I've been hoping that one of the speakers would address the issue of what is the difference, how do you make a decision or a judgment as to whether what someone is saying is a fact or an opinion? And Matthew has just talked about objective reality. If I walk outside and one neighbor says the sky is green and the other neighbor says the sky is red, how am I going to make the decision as to what the sky is?
Is that your question?
My question is, is it better that we should talk about what is the basis on which we believe the fact is a fact?
All right, 1 minute to answer.
What is the basis?
I think this was it Ethan, I believe, was trying to talk about this, and trust, and other speakers as well, is the idea that so many people have, instead of allowing scientists and experts to kind of listening to them, we've allowed this concept of my own reality to grow more and more. And I think that's one of these, getting back towards recognizing expert opinion, that when talking about the coronavirus, when you have epidemiologists talking about coronavirus, those are the ones that we should put weight to, those opinions and borderline facts, as opposed to somebody on a YouTube video. And so I think it's that the difference between an expert opinion and a fact is it's still there, but it exists. And I think it's just making sure we don't allow the noise from the non-expert opinions to muddy the waters of what's facts.
All right, thank you. And there's a question from Nathan. Nathan, you can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Hello there. I'm wondering whether, Madam Chairman, I am wondering whether the speaker believes that we are in a situation where information, facts as we know them, are sort of crowdsourced, perhaps kind of stemming from a basic human tendency, or as a way of sort of translate or filling in for gaps in knowledge, and whether that is in large part due to people's inability to look at science data itself, rather than the results or the conclusions that are drawn by the scientists.
All right, Matt, 1 minute.
I appreciate that. And my response is, the crowdsourcing has been an interesting development with the internet and the democratization of science and everything. And so I think a lot of it is the trust. And I think, and I don't necessarily know how to deal with it, but I think one part of it is a lot of bad actors have, and I forget who it was mentioned earlier about different experts bringing in different sides bringing in different experts. And so these bad faith science, quote unquote experts. So you had the tobacco industry do that back in the 50s and 60s to have their own scientists. There's accusations that Exxon did this similar, where they knew about climate change and then brought in experts to kind of muddy the waters, just to sow the seeds of doubt. And I think that's part of where this is coming from. the combination of the democratization and crowdsourcing of information and bad faith on certain sides.
All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. Moving right along to a speech in the negative, I have Elizabeth Cobbs. Elizabeth, are you ready to make a 3-minute speech? Or less? You can unmute.
Yes, hello. My name is Elizabeth Cobbs. I'm in Massachusetts and I vote Democratic. And I did request to make a few comments on the con side. So I did want to just, similar to the last speaker, it was a bit unusual, I guess, that a Republican was pro and now a Democrat is con. But I think what the concern I have with how the discussion is going, first of all, I love the discussion. I'm very grateful to be here. But I thought the term shared reality needs a bit more clarification. And so I wanted to make my comments around that because con is in terms of how we're using the concept of shared reality. So a little bit about myself. I'm a sociologist by training. I was an academic and then I was in corporate world. And I lived a decade in Japan. I speak Japanese. I love Japanese culture. I am comfortable in that culture. But I thought it was a good example to give about a different reality. As comfortable as I could be in Japan, I'm still a Caucasian American. And my thought processes are actually quite different than how things would be perceived or would be understood in a Japanese context. So a very simple example is when you're at a meal in Japan, people watch very carefully to see how caring you are for those around you. And then they decide that that's your character. You're uncaring or you're caring because you poured drinks for someone else, or you made sure that everyone was served before you were, and so on. So they pick different cues up and they make different decisions based on that. And I had to learn that reality. It's not shared. We could say, I'm not very religious, but I'm sure we could make similar arguments around different religions. Now, in America, we've always embraced many differences. The idea that when I was a young kid and I went first to Japan, it was because I was a curious American who was willing to try that out and learn new things. And having respect for others' religion, having respect for other cultures, I felt was part of being from this wonderful country. Now, I wouldn't call that a shared reality, but I would call that some certain principles that we do share. And I think that in the political realm, what we've been trying to do is really ask way too much of politics. That the political world itself doesn't have to answer all of those questions, but that we go to that political forum with certain shared values. And I think some of the other speakers did start to bring up these ideas of different values and so on. I love Ethan's comments about trust, because when we go into a political arena, there have to be some fundamentals, some of those that Matthew just explained, articulated. Those we have to have some understanding when we reach into that sphere, that those are shared principles that
That's our time.
agree on. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
That's our time. We have a question from Tom. Tom Cook, you can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Yeah, Madam Chair, question for the speaker. What does she think needs to change in America regarding the press? Specifically, how can we improve the press and take out the polarization that is in it currently?
All right, 1 minute to answer.
I think that's a very important question. I'm going to explain a little bit about what I think the problem is too. And I think that, when we come back to who are real experts that we should be putting focus on, like Matthew was talking about, and then the idea of trust that Ethan talked about. With the press, what we have is a problem of too much, right? There are too many different perspectives. There's too much time with cable news to find breaking news all the time. So we as individuals are forced to make more and more decisions about what is trustworthy, rather than have those filters that we used to have through the press. And I think that there's a real danger here that the changes that we see in the press have not obviously helped us in this way. I don't distrust all press, but I do think that there's a lot more time we have to spend trying to define who are the experts and where we can trust. So it's a lot of change I think we need to find in the press. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Another question from Karen Orlando. Karen, you can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Hi, Madam Chair, if you could ask a question to the last speaker. So I'm wondering about what can we do when there are such huge differences in understanding whether historical things have happened or not? So for example, like, did the Holocaust happen or not? Did like the school shooting in Sandy Hook happen or not? So when we get to questions around, like major events that people don't agree on whether they happened or not, like, how do we deal with that? How do we come together when there are such huge differences?
Okay, 1 minute to answer.
I think when we're looking at historical reality, the most important thing is to check sources and to investigate further, to try to understand. If there's a major question of an event, a historical event, not happening versus happening, you have to check your sources. You have to, seek out more information and question where that information is coming from. I think there's some overlap with what I was talking about with the press, that we have to understand what we can trust with sources. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
All right. And with that, the speaker is thanked. All right, moving along, doing well. So we are now moving to a speech in the affirmative. For this round of speeches, it'll still be 3 minutes, but then there will just be one question after each one. So Keith, you're up next to speak in the affirmative. Are you ready to speak for 3 minutes or less?
Yes, thank you. I'm Keith Kozloff. I'm a Blue. I live in Maryland. I'm speaking in the affirmative. And my point is that the lack of shared realities can create such deep trust or even contempt for fundamental institutions such as elections and science that things can really break down because, under our system of government, we elect political leaders and then we follow the laws that they pass. We operate under those laws, and that requires my cooperation, even if I didn't vote for the person who created the law. So if my reality is that an election was stolen and no information to the contrary will convince me otherwise, then I'm going to be reluctant to follow a law that gets passed by who I consider to be an illegitimate winner. And at the community level, I think we also need a shared reality, but in this case, just to care for each other. If I believe that the pandemic is a hoax or it's being exaggerated, then I'm not going to be willing to take what I might consider to be inconvenient measures to protect other people. Or if I believe that climate change is just a hoax perpetrated by scientists to get more funding, then I'm not going to be willing to support measures to protect future generations. You know, not all realities are equal. And according to a Fox News editor, Americans gorge themselves daily on empty informational calories, indulging their sugar fixes of self-affirming half-truths or even outright lies. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Is there a question for the speaker? I see Kimberly and Mike. You can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm the Mike of Kimberly and Mike, and we normally live in Mexico, but we're back in the States thanks to COVID. And my question for the speaker is, to what degree do you think the lockdown, the 9 months that we've been sequestered at home, has affected our psyches and really created the wedge that the different realities are or are not?
Okay, Keith, 1 minute to answer.
That's a really interesting point. And I'm not an expert in social psychology, so I really can't offer an expert opinion about that. But I have to believe that the stresses, emotional and psychological, created by the lockdown over such a long period of time have exacerbated, you know, whatever tendencies people might have had before the pandemic took place. So I don't know that it would have, you know, created distrust where it didn't exist before, but I could believe that it exaggerated.
All right. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Our next speaker is Don Martens, speaking against the resolution. Don, are you ready to speak for up to 3 minutes?
Okay. The resolution is the American system of government cannot function without its citizens subscribing to a shared sense of reality. If, and I'm just talking for instance, a leader were to successfully thwart his being taken out of power, and he keeps power, and he expands on his power to the point where he becomes like Caesar or something in the Roman Empire. And then his that system of government could function. It functioned for 800 years or something like that. And it didn't depend upon the citizens subscribing to any shared sense of reality. He made the decisions about what the reality was. And so can the American system of government function without its citizens subscribing to a shared sense of reality? If you have a leader who is very much like Caesar was, the government could function. That's it.
Thank you very much. Is there a question for the speaker? I recognize Dick Lane. You can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Madam Chairwoman, I would ask the speaker to clarify whether the circumstances he described would result in an American system of government. Thank you.
Okay, 1 minute to answer.
Well, if this happened in America, it would be the American system of government. It may not be exactly what Thomas Jefferson had in mind, but we're not what Thomas Jefferson had in mind right now. So that's it.
All right. And with that, the speaker is thanked.
Follow up, please. Constitutional represent.
We are moving right along. So just to let you know where we're at with speakers, on my list, I'm going to have Neil in the affirmative, then Anita in the negative, then Leo in the affirmative. And then you know what I've got? got a bunch of affirmatives: Betsy, Sally, Damien, Kathy, Polly, Glenn, Christy. All right. So, so I am looking for some speeches against, but I'm also looking for nuance. And at some point we'll just go like speeches on the topic. While we're just in a little bit of a break, please stretch, just go ahead, reach up, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Oh, we can't do that, can we? Yeah, being on Zoom, it's kind of different, but I'll tell you, the Braver Angels debates have become the biggest, just monstrous lead event of Braver Angels nationally, and thousands of people have participated during the pandemic. It's been amazing, and we love it. If you like what we're doing here and you find that, oh, these people are interesting and I might like to make some friends and become maybe a little more involved with Braver Angels debates, I am doing something I've actually never done in all the debates I have chaired online. And that is, I'm going to have a little coffee group this Saturday at my house on Zoom, yes, where you can meet some other participants from tonight. It's just limited tonight. Get to know each other better. I know Aaron Wolf is coming, and we'll see who else. This is just a completely new thing, and we'll post information on the chat at the end of the debate. But if you'd like to learn more about debates and being involved and continue this conversation and just meet some people in a little more casual environment, we're going to try that. Never done it before. Limit like 20 to 25 people, so it's one Zoom screen. So you can be thinking about that, whether you're available Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific. You can figure out what time that is for you. All right, we are back to the debate with Neil Baker. Neil, can you speak for up to 3 minutes?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go for it.
Okay, I'm Neil Baker. I'm from Bainbridge Island, Washington, which is 8 miles west of Seattle across Puget Sound. I'm pretty strong blue leaning, but I know a little bit about the red side because I got my start in the political arena fighting to get Barry Goldwater elected. And what I want to, I support the resolution, but with two caveats. One is, I believe the American system can function without a shared sense of reality, but I do not feel that without a shared sense of reality, we're just not going to make decisions or implement them without any meaningful continuity or optimal success. Then, as far as shared sense of reality, I would propose two ways of thinking about this. One is, in the short term, we do the best we can. And if we can't get to a shared sense of reality, then decisions will be made as they are made, but that we structure the conversation so that we're not left with that we understand why there are differences in reality and build on that learning over time. Now, the way I think of reality is with roughly three components: values, personal, family, and community experience, and data and facts. And what I want to address right now is just the data and facts part. I think in a discussion which looks towards a short-term shared sense of reality or builds on learning, the goal is a shared understanding of the data on which policy differences are arising. Why are differences? What's the data and information which people are using that lead to policy differences? And that we understand from each person's point of view the strengths and limitations of that data. We don't have to agree on that. We can have totally different facts, but we can understand each person's point of view of the strengths and limitations of that. That sets up the potential to learn over time. Now, the way to do this is by taking the brilliant foundation of Braver Angels, which doesn't look to have everybody agree, but looks to understanding, even if there is not agreement, and extend that further to data and facts. To do that, you need some additional norms. And I won't go into the details of that now, but the idea is that you would set up a discussion in which there is not a gotcha, there's not arguments vehemently for and against, that when somebody asserts something, there is a mutual exploration of the data and facts in which they are based. For example, if there's a disagreement about masks, if I believe the data and facts say we should wear masks, somebody doesn't, it's my job with the person who doesn't agree to help them look at all the data possible to look at why, of whether that would, what would support their position, and vice versa with me, so that there isn't this gotcha. There's a mutual look and an understanding of the strengths and limitations. And I think this is feasible to do. I've done that in my career in healthcare on virulent disagreements on different aspects of healthcare. I've also dabbled in that with, I have a red-leaning son and a left-leaning son, and we had this incredible discussion about defunding the police.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, that's our time. And I have a question from Christine MacArthur. You can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Okay, I didn't think you'd pick me. I guess my question was, how do you define what is a shared sense of reality? Let's take something like simple, like somebody mentioned before. Is the earth round? Many of us would say that's a shared sense of reality, but there's a lot of people in the world, strangely enough, that don't believe that. So
your question is then
my question to the Madam Speaker is, how do you define a shared sense of reality?
Okay, thank you. 1 minute to answer.
You know whether you know it if there is one, and if there isn't, you don't have it. For example, is the earth round or flat? In the discussion, the nature of the discussion I'm proposing, we would understand the basis on which somebody is asserting that it's a flat, and the basis, the person who's asserting it's round, why they assert it. And we'd understand the data, strengths and limitations from each person's point of view. Whether that leads to a shared sense of reality may not happen, but at least you have a deeper understanding which can be built on over time.
All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. Next speaker is Anita, speaking in the negative. Anita, you have up to 3 minutes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anita, and I'm in Southern California in Riverside. I am a conservative, and I'm really excited about Braver Angels, and I'm very grateful for it because it's, I guess I picked Con because I don't think we're there. I don't think there is a shared sense of reality. I'm not sure that there's any way to get one. It's real easy to pick what facts you want to go with from what you think you believe to start with. And it's more easy than it ever has been to get downright tribal about it. So that if you disagree with someone and you are surrounding yourself with other people that share that as a reality, then you kind of dismiss the people that feel differently than you. And I have felt this very strongly within my family, within people that I've known for 20 years in this last election. And I grew up with Walter Cronkite. And I know that there were things that Walter Cronkite didn't tell me, but that's kind of all the information we had. Now we have an abundance of information, and we have the burden of discernment within ourselves. I think one of the very nice things about Braver Angels is that every time I've been in one of the debates, I have come away with the fact that we really all, red or blue, want the same thing. We want to be safe, we want to get along with each other. And I think the speaker was Aaron earlier, who had spoken about getting down to the issue at hand. No matter what you believe about X, let's figure out a way to get to the issue at hand right this minute. So I guess my feeling is that we don't have one, and we have to have the system that we have because we all like it. we just have to figure out how to get along with each other and find out what each other still needs to be able to exist in this framework that we've got. You know, all civilizations don't last forever. I just really enjoy it here, and I would like to think that we could keep it going. Is that my time signal?
That is your time. One of our chairs on her timer, she's got disco music, and so everybody's grooving at the end of every speech. It's pretty fun. I got to figure out how to do that. All right. So is there a question for the speaker? I'm going to be looking for people I haven't already heard from. Marley Silverman.
Go. Technical difficulties. Madam Chair, I would like you to ask the last speaker if she believes that having always two opposing point of views, whether they're factual or not, are actually conducive for better understanding in our society.
All right, 1 minute to answer.
Thank you for that question. I guess I've grown up in that. So I grew up with parents that came home from an election and said, well, I just canceled you out, husband. And they kissed and went on about their day. So I've always flourished in an environment where people felt this way or that. And then we find a way to get along with it, no matter what the outcome is. If I see the man that I didn't vote for in office now, I don't have to go overthrow the Capitol building. My goodness, I can just figure out how I can best deal with what I've got now and do the next best thing.
And with that, speaker is thanked. Get your hands going, people, show some appreciation. All right. So we're moving to 2-minute speeches. So you really want to encapsulate your main point, 2-minute speeches. The next couple of speeches can have a question after, but we're just going to move faster and faster and just try to get everybody's voices in that would like to speak. The next 4 speakers are going to be Leo, Tom Cook, Betsy Baker, and Jay Tom. So we'll start with Leo. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, my name's Leo Gilmore. I'm from the Philadelphia area. I come at this from a leadership and a high performing team perspective. I'm going to break reality down into a smaller elephant, no pun intended. I'm independent. I lean blue on this one. So the elephant I'm going to define is called Big R. And when I started to work with people who disagreed with where I thought reality was, I came up with a list of things that said, what things do I think we can agree on? What realities, what elements of realities do I think we should agree on? So that's where I'm coming from. And that, I believe, should happen to be a more perfect union. So what are the elements of Big R that I'm thinking should be included in this Big R reality? Things like we want to be a democracy, not a dictatorship. We want liberty. We want freedom of speech, etc. We want a constitution. We want a rule of law, nonviolent resolutions. These are elements of my Big R. Opportunity to provide yourself and your family a job, a place to grow, public education, availability of health care, some minimums that we could agree on, states' rights, a federal government that serves national security, et cetera. So these are my elements of Big R that I really think we maybe don't have, but we should have, and including the leader should have a shared sense of reality around an agreement on these elements of structure, these elements of principle for democracy, these elements of values. And if we don't, I don't think we'll succeed or our democracy will survive. I'm done.
All right. And is there a question for the speaker? I see Christine MacArthur. You can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
There you go. Okay. When you said big R, this is something I wanted to hear. Maybe this is not just when
the speaker said,
Madam Speaker, my
yes.
question is just to the comment, but maybe to all these things, but you said big R, this kind of struck me. Where does racism come into all this? Because I feel that racism has a great deal to do with the division in our country right now. And it's kind of like the elephant in the closet that a lot of people don't want to mention.
Thank you. 1 minute, Leo, to answer.
Yeah, I'll answer that by saying I believe racism should be in big R, but may not be able to be right now. So I came up with a list of things that I thought I could work with the other side with, friends, relatives, family, that we maybe can work towards a shared reality definition and understanding. Well, we may not have the same opinions about, but I believe I put racism in. I would, but maybe not with some people that I could, sort of get a common understanding. High performing teams have a couple things that in common, and that is they have shared goals and they have a shared agreement on how things are going to work. And we don't have that here in America.
And the speaker is thanked. Next up, Tom Cook, speaking against the resolution. Tom Cook, you have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you. God bless America. And thank you to the lady that was from California that represents America. It's beautiful. To the gentleman that talked about looking at both sides and evaluating all the facts from both sides, like regarding flat Earth. 74 million Americans would have loved to have seen that with this election, but we didn't. And to the lady that talked about the hitting the tree, what happens is if the two shared realities aren't discussed, what we end up doing is hitting head on into the fact, which is an election system that no one trusts. And the country is in peril at that point. And you can't avoid it if you just don't address both realities. So I thought that was a good point about eventually the water is going to come up if you just don't talk about each side of climate change and so forth. And I thought it was great, the two different scientists, the water mediator and the NASA scientist. Is interesting how the water mediator gentleman said, even with the science data, you can come to two different conclusions. And I see that, especially with this coronavirus, it's novel. I think it would have gone a long way if the epidemiologists would have been able to share with the public that there was a lot of uncertainties in what they were statements they were making, and that the facts were going to change as time went along, rather than people who question them being told just be quiet and trust the science. That again, it's two different realities you want to explore, but the one you're told to stay quiet.
Thank you. And for a question, I will call on Susan Raybuck. Susan, you can unmute and ask your question to the chair.
Madam Chair, I wanted to ask the last speaker if he had a sense of being able to trust the institution of the judiciary and their rulings on the evidence of fraud or no evidence of fraud in more than 60 cases, or if there were other factors that made him unable to trust there.
All right, 1 minute to answer.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, as the gentleman said, the evidence behind the cases was kind of pushed to the side, and the focus was on the cases were lost and move on. I do trust the judiciary, but I live in Pennsylvania. In 2018, my wife's vote didn't count because I handed her mail-in ballot to the election office instead of her, and it was illegal. But in 2020, anybody could drop a ballot in a drop box in Pennsylvania, and it was legal. So there was just adjudicating that needed to happen that didn't. And we do have in Pennsylvania a partisan court. We're humans. We definitely have partisan leanings, and judges fall to that too.
All right, and the speaker is thanked. Coming to a speech in the affirmative, Betsy, you have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you. I will start with a story about the news. I grew up in a Republican household. My best friend grew up in a very strong Democratic household. Both of our fathers watched the PBS NewsHour, so we did too. Our mothers were probably in the kitchen. Life has changed, thankfully. And after her father died, she was talking to my dad about NewsHour. And he said, "Oh, I just found it always so liberal. It was too liberal." And she looked at him and said, "My dad found it far too conservative." And they looked at each other and burst out laughing. We don't have even that in common anymore. And just a series of propositions about why education is important and teaching critical thinking. How much reality do we need to share? Because there are people, unlike Anita, who still want to overthrow and storm the Capitol because of the results that they don't want to accept. You can't just make up facts, is something we were always told in school and throughout our life. I'm a retired professor. You do have to do the hard work of fact checking, but how do you reach people who are so far into conspiracy theories that they don't necessarily have or have abandoned critical thinking? I try to say that without as much judgment as I can. But part of the problem is many people don't trust the experts and don't trust the elites, and the elites don't hear why they are not trusted. And they dismiss people entirely for not trusting them. I'm going to end with a quotation. I used to live in Boston. This is from the Boston Public Library doorway. "The Commonwealth requires the education of the people as the safeguard of order and liberty." And I feel like we are not educating people sufficiently because we aren't giving the education system sufficient public resources.
Thank
So
you.
these are random thoughts. Thank you.
A question from Courtney Budd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question for Betsy Baker is if she feels that lack of trust of the elite, especially the elite media, even the mainstream media, may have to do, based on Betsy Baker's background, not to be such.
Okay, can you make that into a question?
Well, if it is affected by the way the news people present, the feelings people have when news people use certain words to deliver the news.
No, I think that it is, and I will count myself as part of the elite, having had the incredible opportunities of education. I'm not hearing, and this is what Braver Angels is teaching me, I am not hearing what a lot of the people who feel disregarded have to say, what their concerns are. I don't say that justifies storming the Capitol, but I think it does. We need to understand, and my red colleagues in Braver Angels are teaching me, we need to understand that it's not just because it's the news media. It's because there are concerns that our political system is not addressing for a large swath of our citizenry.
And the speaker is thanked. Speaking against the resolution, J. Tom, you have up to 2 minutes.
All right, hopefully it won't take that long. I'm gonna say we don't need a shared sense of reality. The question itself is a lie that leads us to believe that our sense of reality matters at all. The definition of reality is the world or the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or notional idea of them. A sense of reality is that idealistic and notional idea. The world is round is not a sense, the world is round is not a reality. It's somebody's sense of reality, and it has nothing to do with the truth. So we can prove that wrong. The sense of reality does not matter. So we need to get rid of all sense of reality. We need to stop thinking that our feelings matter in regards to reality. We need a shared set of facts, and the facts will automatically lead us to what reality is. We can talk about what our values are. We can talk about principles. These are things that are open to discussion. Reality is reality. It is the facts. So that's what we need to look at. That's all I got.
Thank you. A question for Tom? Christine?
Wait, I mean, I'm just confused here. Like, there are things that are facts. Don't tell an astronaut the world isn't round. The world is round.
What is your question? Put it in the form of a question, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, my question to the last speaker is that there are facts. There are facts in the world. And I think the biggest question we have here in this discussion is, how do you define what is a fact? That the world is round has been scientifically proven. And like I said, any astronaut who's been out in space can tell you he's seen it.
Thank you. So 1 minute to answer.
Yes, Christine, I'm sorry. I don't know if I said something that was not understood. I agree 100% on facts, and I'm saying that facts are all that matter. I'm saying reality matters. I'm saying our sense of reality is what does not matter at all, because our sense of reality is only our own filters on facts that are distorting the facts so often.
Madam Speaker, could he just explain that a little? I mean, reality and facts are these two different things?
No. Sense of reality versus reality. Somebody's sense of reality is their perception of it, and their perception doesn't matter is what I'm saying. What matters is the facts and just the simple reality, not the sense of reality.
All right, and the speaker is thanked.
Thank you.
We are coming closer to the end, and so I'm going to go for 1 minute speeches in the order that people have asked without questions, as people have chatted to the whips. And so that will be Damien and then Nathan are the next two. So Damien, you have 1 minute.
All right, well, I'll make this brief then. The biggest thing I have to say is I'm affirming the resolution. I don't believe that we can have a peaceful discussion if you believe that you have been genuinely wronged by the system. If you believe the system genuinely stole the election from you and that the president was not the one you elected, then the system in your mind doesn't work. It no longer functions as a system because your voice has been squashed. If you believe on some moral level that the president that's been put in place is a demon, I remember hearing, at least from family members, that Obama was actually sent from Satan and he was he was going to bring about the end times. If you genuinely believe that, then you can't have a functioning government because you can't work under somebody that you believe is the Antichrist. And from a Pew Research statistic that Brave Angels uses, oh, my bad. I'll just say the statistic real quick. If a quarter of each party thinks the other is the enemy, how can you peacefully talk?
All right, thank you. Nathan, to speak in the negative, 1 minute.
Right. So I would say that our system of government is one that is designed to to allow for disagreements on fact, on having different senses of reality, different beliefs. Given that we elect representatives who are expected to have a greater shared sense of reality between them, the rest of us as a public has less of a burden to do our research and to come to consensus. We delegate that to our representatives. And I think the rest of us just need to be able to agree to disagree and not consider every disagreement to be a critical existential threat. And I believe that we also need to have, I believe that the transfer of power from legislative branch to the executive branch has made it more difficult to delegate, or the feeling that the executive is more powerful than it used to be or should be, makes it more difficult to delegate that responsibility to our representatives.
Thank you. The next two speakers are going to be Kathy and Polly, and then Glenn, Bobby, Jessica. We'll try to get you all in. Kathy, you have 1 minute.
Sorry, I wasn't ready. Okay, I'm an economist who worked for the Department of Housing and Urban Development for 25 years, and I've been concerned about poverty in the country since I was in college or so. And I know from research that many of the time the bills, the laws that are passed when they come up with findings, the findings even themselves are not true. They come from headlines that have been misrepresented by economic interests. And for housing, it's the builders and the real estate people who want to build expensive housing, et cetera. It was Exxon for climate change. It was the tobacco industries. And I guess I'm thinking that we do need a shared sense of reality, but the increasing role of corporations and economic interests is responsible for a lot of the problems we have.
Thank you. I see we were supposed to have a hard stop for the next thing at 6:50. I'm Pacific time, but I'm going to bring in one more, and that's Kathy. You have 1 minute to speak, and then we go on to our next activity. Kathy, 1 minute.
Another Kathy or me again?
It's let's see. Oh, here I go. I have a list. Polly, I'm going to get you right in.
It's Polly. Hi, Polly from Minneapolis.
Hello, 1 minute.
Thank you. I don't think we currently have a functioning democracy with 500,000 people dead from this COVID virus when we could have had a common solution to help us make this work. So I think that there are institutions at the federal and state level that used to be common reality for everyone. The specific I'm going to talk about is elections. As an election judge, my whole focus is getting everybody who has the right to vote. And I'm offended by the fact that people have said that my election was not a valid election. And so I'm wanting us to get back to some of those institutions, like a true press that is being objective, people understanding elections are important and education is important, and we do have to work on racism. So those are the few things I can think of in 1 minute.
All right, and the speaker is thanked. All right, my staff is telling me I need to stop bringing in these speakers, even though we're really close. But I want to give jazz hands for everybody that has spoken, and we have 2 more things to do before we have before we end at 10 o'clock Eastern time. What we're going to do is we are going to have the link to the feedback form is going to be in the chat, and they're going to take care of that because we really, really appreciate your feedback. Debates have gotten so much better They run really well, and largely it's because of your feedback helping us out. So we really want you to do that feedback form. Also in the chat, you've probably seen a link to join Braver Angels at just $12 a year. Be part of this movement. You're seeing us on the front page of the USA Today. You're seeing us on all the news networks. You're just seeing a lot of Braver Angels moving around the country, and we want you to be part of it. So we're going to take a few minutes right now, and I'm going to ask you, what was something you enjoyed or something you learned? And this is not the time to say, I learned that the other side was stupid. That doesn't work so well. What we're looking at is in the Braver Angel spirit, something you enjoyed or something you learned. It's not a time to make a speech, but if you can just give us a phrase or a sentence about something you enjoyed or something you learned. Also, Cliff is going to open up the chat so that you can put in what you enjoyed or what you learned. So that can go there too. But I'm going to invite you to raise your hand, your virtual hand, so you can say it. Alex, what is something you enjoyed or learned?
Well, I enjoyed really seeing people work through their thoughts in real time. And also I enjoyed people obviously having listened very carefully and referencing certain things and kind of wrapping their thoughts around those in meaningful and inoffensive ways.
Thank you. Patty, what did you enjoy or what did you learn?
I was really happy that the last two speakers were able to express their firsthand experience, one as an economist for HUD and dealing with this, not correct information and how that affects our policymaking, and our election official who was able to say, hey, we have rules, we are great Americans, and we protect democracy. So I'm glad they had a forum to do that.
Thank you. Bobby Ratliff, what did you enjoy or learn?
I enjoyed the idea that you say what you believe and not some hypothetical thing that you heard on the internet that you just want to repeat and test people's reactions.
Thanks. Keith, what did you enjoy or what did you learn?
Well, I came into the debate with a pretty hard and rigid point of view, and I ended the debate with a much more nuanced and softened point of view. So that was good.
Thank you. Sharon.
I appreciated that people felt safe to be who they are, where they've come from, and how they arrived at their perspective. It's so inspiring, and I'm almost in tears. Thank you.
Marla. And if you unmute, I can hear you.
No.
Marla, you still need to unmute. There you go.
Oh, wow.
Gotcha. What did you enjoy or learn?
Oh my goodness, being the first lead speaker, I was so excited about it, and trying to think, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to say the words correctly? It was really a very wonderful experience in being in a safe space and being able to express my position. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Jessica.
Hello, thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed learning that there are other young people in the country who are interested in these issues and interested in talking about this, because oftentimes even my friends who are involved in politics don't really get this deep in the weeds about these philosophical issues.
All right, Denny.
What I appreciated and noticed was this: every speaker had to be vulnerable to whatever question might show up after they gave their talk. And there's a lot of courage that I saw here, and I was very appreciative of that.
Christine.
Mute. Okay, here I go. Okay, what I thought was interesting was the way the debate was framed, that it wasn't clear to me like who was red and who was blue. And I thought that was a really interesting thing because we weren't discussing this in terms of that, because the question had nothing really to do with it. And I thought that was a great way of doing this whole forum. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Thanks. And the resolution was crafted by a team. Luke Phillips on our media team took the lead on that, and we appreciate the nuance of it. And I'll take one more verbally, and that's Emily Gallagher. What did you enjoy or what did you learn? Emily, can you unmute? There you go.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I enjoyed watching your style of keeping the debate organized and focused on time and having questioners ask questions. And it was a great model for how to have a conversation that is not hostile and can be productive. Thank you.
Yeah, this is really, really fun. Cliff, have we covered everything?
It was a great night. Thank you, everyone.
And with that, good night.